Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and the Demons have had the worst start to a season in 6 years as they slump to 0-2 and sit firmly in the bottom four. Joining me tonight to analyse the disastrous loss to the Kangaroos at Marvel Stadium is George. Good evening, George.
Is it a good evening, Andy? Hopefully better than what I was feeling on Sunday. But a good evening to all our listeners, all the faithful still out there, all three of you. So hang in there. Evening to Bin Man. I'm really glad in a way that we didn't do our pre-season predictions this year because I think they would have been dramatically changed after the game that we witnessed on Sunday at Marvel.
Well, also joining us tonight, Bin Man, to no doubt tell us that the silver lining to this deflating defeat is that we're only one game out of the 8. Good evening, Bin Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. I didn't know that. That's good, Sue. But like you're helping me along there. I'm having a positive influence on you, Andy. That's great.
And percentage. Don't forget about that.
There's plenty of, yeah, look at how frustrating was it, but there's plenty of things that you could point to, history being one of them, and, we'll talk about it as the show goes on, but, we talked about this last year, even when we started with a win after our loss to the Swans and then the next win, is that, the whole game of each week making everything about a litmus test for the finals. It's, the game is shifting radically, and there's a bit we'll talk about around fitness, and I think it's really fascinating, the shift in the game. But when I talk about history, the reality is that after round 7 last year, Geelong hadn't lost a game, didn't make the grand final. The Swans hadn't lost a game, won their first 10, and I think, 11 out of their first 12 games. Ran out of steam in the first in the grand final. Hawthorn lost their first 5 games, came storming home. The Premiers lost their first 3 games, came storming home. And with Hawthorn, their average winning losing margin in those first games was 30-plus points. So including getting towed up by us by 55 points. And I think the Suns might have towed them up by, I'm pretty sure the Suns towed them up by 50-plus points as well, all in that first 5 rounds. And they were everyone's darling by the end of the season. So, sure, it was a shocking loss, but let's look at recent history, not in the dusty past history. Let's look at recent history for a guide of how the game's shifting and the relative significance of wins in the early season, or not, as the case may be.
I reckon if we played Hawthorn the way to next week, the way we played this week, that whatever we beat them by last year would be doubled.
And I'm sure that if the Hawthorn podcast, the Eagle's Nest or some such, were reviewing after they chipped it around almost the entire game in the back half and we dismantled them in round 2, would have been saying, sack Mitchell, he's a joke. What sort of game plan is this? Let's move him on. It's time for him to go. Mitchell's had his shot. What was he thinking with his recruiting? And on and on.
They've recruited fantastically this year.
Have they? Well, that's not what Hawks fans were saying after losing 5 on end at the end of last season. So
I would take those two. I would take those 2 defenders and I would play him in our forward line. All right.
Oh, no,
Barras and
we've
Battle.
done well this year, but this is not a Hawks pod.
No, it's not, and it's not the Eagles Nest either, because I think I'd rather be on the Eagles Nest podcast at the moment. Each week, I invite our loyal listeners to support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcast. We truly appreciate your feedback. And as a token of our gratitude, we give a well-deserved shout-out to those who do take the time to share their reviews. And True Red and Blue writes, as a Melbourne supporter living in the UK, the Demonland podcast has been an absolute lifeline. With the time difference and absolutely no local coverage, staying connected to the club I love isn't always easy, but this podcast bridges the gap beautifully. The hosts are knowledgeable, passionate, and clearly live and breathe the Ds. I especially appreciate the detailed match analysis, the honest and intelligent discussions, and the sense of community that comes through in every episode. Even from the other side of the world, it makes me feel like I'm a part of the red and blue faithful. If you're a Demons fan abroad, this podcast is essential listening. Cheers from London. Go D's. Well, thank you for that review. True Red and Blue. Keep that feedback coming. Simply leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcast, and we will give you a shout out on the show. And if you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, you want to leave us some feedback, ask a question, or share a comment for the show, you can do so under our weekly podcast post or just slide into our DMs. And don't worry, we won't read out your full name on the air. And I've got to apologise for last week. Two Facebook people, Vic and one from Instagram, Nat, did put in questions last week, and I wasn't connected to my Demonland account. I was connected to my personal account, so I missed it. I apologise to them. They were very very nice about that. So sorry, Vic and Nat. If you can download and listen to the Demonland podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, or your favourite podcasting app. And in addition, you can also watch and listen on YouTube. Just search for Demonland Podcast to find our channel, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And you want to connect with other Demon fans, if you haven't checked out our Demonland forum, head on over to demonland.com, sign up, join in the conversation with fellow supporters from across Australia and around the world. It's completely free. In addition to posting questions or comments for the show, you'll find endless discussions on all things Demons related, and you can join us in crying about the losses. If you want to jump on the air tonight and have your say on any of the topics we're covering, give us a call on 0390163666. That's 0390163666. I'll answer. I'll put you on mute. I'll bring you on when there's a break in the conversation, and you can call that number anytime during the week. Leave us a message. We'll play it out on the show. And if you our chat room is still down. We won't go into that. We do go live now on Monday nights at 8 p.m. It's a new time. So if you want to catch the show as it happens, head on over to demonland.com and tune in. Oh, guys, I'll get straight into the match overview. We don't need to to dwell on that. I'll get through it very quickly. The Demons suffered a significant 59-point defeat to North Melbourne at Marvel Stadium, and this loss marked their second consecutive defeat to start the season, raising concerns about the team's form and strategy. The D's began the game with competitive intensity but struggled to convert their efforts into scoreboard pressure. Despite registering more inside 50s than North Melbourne, 56-53, their inefficiency in attack was glaring. The third quarter epitomised these struggles. Melbourne dominated forward entries 19-9, yet were outscored by 6 points during that period. And coach 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗁 acknowledged the team's shortcomings, emphasising the need to improve the connection between midfield and forward players to enhance scoring efficiency. And Demons captain and star ruckman Max Gawn had an uncharacteristically subdued game. He was largely outplayed by North Melbourne's Tristan Xerri, who amassed 20 disposals, 12 clearances, 29 hitouts and a goal. And post-match, 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗁 hinted at off-field issues affecting Gawn's performance, stating, "You also have to realise that in life there are other things going on." And Chandler was one of the few bright spots for Melbourne. Chandler delivered a standout performance with 25 disposals and 3 goals. And the loss intensified scrutiny on coach 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗁's game plan. Critics on Demonland argued that since the 2021 premiership, the team has regressed, with some fans expressing a loss in confidence in Goulburn's ability to adapt and drive the team forward. Supporters reflect a growing sentiment that strategic and personnel changes are necessary to halt the current decline. The Demons' 0-2 start to the season is the worst in 6 years, prompting urgent calls for change. Coach Goodwin emphasised the importance of resilience, stating the team must stay the course and trust in their pre-season preparations. Addressing the inefficiencies in attack and reinforcing defensive structures will be pivotal as the D's aim to rebound in the coming rounds, a task that will be challenging given the availability of key players. The next month of games may well determine the fate of the team in the 2025 season. So, big man, do you want to get into your stats file? We don't have any commentary from the Pearl this week, so if you want to go, take it away.
Yes, the Pearl, indeed. Well, it was not good reading this week for stats, was it? It was, or on any level, it was a horror game, and you're legitimately right about the sort of risk of going down 0-3. It's as much as obviously the Lions went on to win a flag. I don't want to be going down 0-3. That is for sure. So I talked last week about the player stats, so I'll talk about them each week. Clayton Oliver had a fantastic game and a much better game than I actually thought watching live, to be honest. He had, remember, I noted last week that an elite game of football, an all-Australian standard game of football, is 20 rating points. Clas topped our list with 19.9 points, which was a terrific effort, really. And big shout out to the second player on the list. I thought he was terrific for the entire match. Really, really, really terrific. Chandler, 19.5 points. 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁, 15.3, which was probably his best game for a long time. I'd note too that Chin's highest scoring, or second highest actually, quarter was the last, which is great. And the same was true of 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁. Bringing up the top five was 𝗣𝗶𝘀𝘀𝗁, who I thought had a really good game, a couple of clangers notwithstanding. And just on that, if we want the team to play aggressive footy, we're going to have to cop some turnovers. But he did a couple, obviously. But his last quarter was pretty reasonable as well. As you noted, Maxi Gawn, after his heroics of last week, he was up around, I think, 18 and 19 points last week. His match rating dropped to 11.2, which is below his average, which says something about the standard to which he plays, that's a below average. So the good, I put a lot of stock in players, always have ever since the dark days of the 70s. I've always respected players who play well when the team plays poorly, and Robbie Flower was the epitome of that. I just loved that he never dropped his head, always played well. So total respect for Clarry and Chin, with both having nearly 20 player rating points, and also for 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁, 15.3 rating points. I'm guessing would be his highest point for some time. And I'd guess 19.5 is Chin's highest ever player rating. Apologies for my lack of research. I'll find that out. But I wasn't in much headspace to drill too far down on the numbers this week. Could be good. This could be in the. This is one of those numbers that. The Pearl, I thought of you when I saw this. You can make anything look good, and there's another one coming up. But so this could be good or could be bad. A second game player, Lindsay, who had a fantastic game. I thought he was terrific. He had the most pressure acts and most pressure points. He was a full 18 pressure points more than the second player, Chandler, who had 23 pressure acts and 47 pressure points. Now, that's, as I say, that's great that he did that on a personal level, but I think it really says something about the effort level and our general energy into this game, which it just seemed off the entire game. And but for him in his second game of footy to not just have the most pressure points, but to be miles on most. So hats off to him though. That's on an individual level, that's terrific. So he had, as I said, 65 pressure points. One more good. And Pearl, this is really the one where I was thinking of you about using stats to, stats, lies, and whatever it is, damn statistics. We more than tripled our scores from defensive half this week. We more than tripled our scores from defensive half. Unfortunately, we only scored 7 of those points last week. So we scored 22 points from our back half this year, which was an improvement. By way of contrast, they scored 38 from their back half. So now the bad, where to start? You go to player performances really for a starting point, just on an individual level. Only 8 players had more than 10 player rating points. By way of comparison, last week, 11 players had more than 10 rating points. So, 15 players running around. One of them went off at the end of the first quarter, obviously Jefferson with 0.1 of a point. 15 players scored less than 10 player rating points. And again, after knocking Fritter, I don't want to be on Fritter's back, but after knocking Fritter last week and noting he had only 4.4 rating points last week and that we really needed more from such an important senior player, fortunately he had a worse game, at least on the player ratings. And to be honest, even the eye seemed to suggest the same thing. So he only scored 2.1 player rating points this week. But if I'm going to knock Fritter, and this is one of the things I like about looking at the data and looking at the statistics, and disabusing myself a little bit of my preconceived notions. One of which was I thought Spargo played well. I would have thought he played well. I hadn't watched the replay, but people were criticising him on Demonland. I thought, is that fair? But he was our fourth lowest rated player, Charlie, 2.8 points. But below him, as I said, if I'm going to knock Fritter as a senior player, Fritter was our third lowest rated player, but our third rated player just behind him. Sorry, our third rated player just above him was 𝗍𝗏, Christian. 𝗍𝗏 only scored 2.3 player rating points. Last week, he was our second highest rated player with 16.8 points. He's one of our best players. That's a terrible game by his standards. He would have barely had any games that scored that low in his entire career. Again, I'll find that out. Like for playing a full game of footy, I would suspect that would be one of his lowest ever, probably one of his 10 lowest scores ever. So it was a really curious performance by him. The bad is to continue. Like I could have picked out a bunch of numbers, but our contest was absolutely woeful. We were down. We were beaten around the ball all match. They clearly were, stronger at the ball. They wanted the ball. They were running harder. They were more ballistic. We had 120 contested possessions. They had 139. So and minus 19 differential. And this one wasn't as bad as it could have been with that number, but post-clearance contested possessions, arguably the most important, one of the most important stats in footy, and all clubs put a really high emphasis on this. So they beat us in that area. They were +6 for post-clearance contested possessions, so that's after... they're critical to win that ball, obviously, and they did a good job. I was actually thinking that might be worse, though. So the ugly, again, I could have picked any number of things. These were just the most ugly from my perspective in terms of its impact on our chances of winning. After giving up 44 points on turnover against the Giants, 15-point differential, we went from bad to worse this week. We gave up 43. So we only scored 43 points ourselves. We gave up 60 points on turnover this week. 9 goals, 60 points for a 17-point differential in their favour. That's just not good enough. Giving up 60 points on turnover is just terrible. And from good to ugly, this was just a staggering number, and this was an example of the stats completely and utterly aligning with what the eyes were telling us watching live. The Roos outscored us by 42 points from stoppages. Just nuts, just total nuts. So 2 goals, 2-14 we scored from stoppages, 7 goals, 143 from the centre bounce. They scored, so from the centre bounce, we scored 2 goals, 2-14. They scored 7 goals, 143. So remarkably accurate, but most of them were running straight down the middle straight towards me. I was up the top of the level 3 behind that the city end, and so those goals, they were running in a channel directly towards me. And this was staggering as well. Around the ground stoppages, they outscored us. We only scored 3 points. And again, I would have to look at the data, but she said wouldn't be many times ever under Goodwin that we would have scored only 3 points from stoppages, especially indoors. Remarkable stat. And they only scored 16 points, but the differential was 13. So for us to only score 3 is unbelievable. In the stats file thread, a 2025 edition on Demonland, Wheelo was asked if 43 points was the most an opponent had scored against us from centre bounces. Wheelo advised that they have data back to the start of the 2017 season, and that's the most we've conceded since then. So it just shows how horrible we were in terms of whatever was happening around the centre bounces stoppages. It really showed up right there. So 42 points, not far off the total losing margin. And then, of course, our pressure was totally woeful, particularly in the last quarter when the game was there to be won. In the first quarter, by way of comparison, our pressure we were +16, so 186. We dropped off in the second quarter, 169. We came out in the third quarter, and I thought it had our best quarter. That was our best quarter for the game, and we just couldn't, get scores on the board and take advantage of our relative, performance in that. We were pretty good. Still only 171, and we dropped away completely in the last quarter, 162 to 174. Keeping in mind last week's was pressure was like 195 to 198, or it was close on 200 being the sort of the measure where they want to be at clubs. 172 to 176, we down by 4, but 172 ain't going to get the job done, and it speaks to our effort levels in the match. The Curious, not sure that I'm loving Melbourne Footy Club's new motto, the D's, playing teams back into form since 1854. North Melbourne's 59-point victory over us was their largest winning margin since round 8 of the 2020 season. And as there were a lot of happy Roos fans going out, leaving the ground, singing the song, so good luck to them. But yeah, it was a pretty hollow feeling leaving that the dark, dank Marvel Stadium and getting the train a ride home. So that's the stats file this week, Andy.
Well, I wasn't ready for that to end. Well done, Pim, man. I was making a sandwich. I was just getting up. All right, well, let's get into our listener questions then. As expected, Demonland went into meltdown after the game, and even during it, to be fair, with many of the comments in our podcast thread saying stuff like this. Sam6172 writes, would just like to wish you all the best. I feel like this one could be brutal. Leave It to Diva writes, what the hell happened? And Demon Saw writes, do you think the Bombers will net one decent player with the first and second overall picks in the 2025 draft? Now, I don't know if that's a knock on the Bombers or lamenting the fact that the Bombers, in fact, have the D's first pick in this year's draft, which now it very well could be a high one. Go Lordy says, I thought we'd go top 4 this year. I'm thinking bottom 4 now. I reckon Anzac Eve will decide the wooden spoon. And DFuture15 says, please explain. Ethan Tremblay asks, how do you guys get the motivation to do an episode this week? I understand it's a commitment, but geez Louise, I won't be giving this game another thought. Wise words, as always, Ethan, wise words. And finally, D Old Fart says, please give me something positive, no matter how small, on which I can pin my hopes in the lead up to Gold Coast Suns. Thanks in advance. Now, George, emotions are understandably running high, and this is nothing new to us on Demonland. We've been around, and you've been there too, for a quarter of a century. And we've seen it all. We lived through the heartbreak of the 2000 grand final when we got comprehensively beaten. We've ridden the roller coaster of the Danaher years, experienced rock bottom through the tanking saga, and endured over a decade in the wilderness without finals actions. We witnessed the struggles of the Bailey years, the turmoil under Nealed, wooden spoons, and painfully uncompetitive sides. Then came the renewed hope during the Roos era, culminating in the ultimate glory of finally reaching the promised land with Goody at the helm. Only to celebrate isolated in our homes, confined to our couches. And since then, despite multiple years finishing in the top 4, we've repeatedly exited finals in straight sets. And now, even though we're only in round 2, it feels like this era, one that promised multiple premierships, may already be slipping away, if not firmly out of our grasps. Can we get any rays of sunshine out of you?
It's good that I get this job, isn't it? It's fantastic. Find the positives, and unfortunately you just opened up there reminding me of all the bad years. I said before the program started to Andy, this is the worst that I've seen. The performance was the worst I've seen from a Melbourne club, certainly since 2013, with the lack of effort that went into this game. My real concern is that we're playing Geelong down at Geelong in a couple of weeks' time, and we could see a repeat of what happened in that year.
This is not a great start to right. Andy, can you just go back over the dot points of what the questions were?
So I've been asked to find the positives, and they've actually already been covered off in by both Binman in his stats files and Andrew in his introduction. Chandler was an absolute standout in this game. Absolute standout. I was surprised even in Goody's post-game presser, where he pointed out that he played in 5 different positions on the ground and he performed excellently in all of them. My question would be, why is he playing in 5 different positions?
Were you, just before you go on, were you, either of you, just when he lined up on the wing at the start? It just seems bizarre. That
it's not only bizarre, there are other bizarre things. For example, Langdon lined up at centre forward.
Yeah.
And you go, what is going on? And I'll talk about a few other things that I saw going on during the game, which were completely bizarre. The other good positive was obviously Clayton Oliver. Now, Clary is back to his best. That you can write off what happened last year, since he was carrying an injury basically for the whole year, could never perform.
He's being heavily tagged in games there.
Yeah, but even in this game, when there was very little coming from support around him, in fact, the support was probably non-existent around him. He was the one who really stood out in the middle for us when we absolutely needed him. So it's good to have Clayton back. The trouble and the difficulty is, if we keep playing games like this, it really affects players who are really putting their heart and soul into it, to come up with similar performances week after week after week. Xavier Lindsay, fantastic, absolutely fantastic again. Second game for the club. This guy is absolutely reeking of talent. Puts in when he needs to. He is going to be something that we can really hang our hats on for a long, long time to come. So a great pickup in the draft as a result of that. The final positive
before you go on, can I give my MFCSS take on that?
All right, go.
He can't wait to get out of this club.
Oh, there might be a few others ahead of him, unfortunately. Yeah.
Shaking his head.
Last positive, and the only one I really struggled to find was it's 5 days till our next match, so all could be forgiven. We've only got 5 more days of pain to go.
Man, I don't want to. Yeah, all right. Any rays of sunshine from you?
Well, other than what I've mentioned already, is that stripping away don't get me wrong, it was awful. I don't know, back to 2013, but it was the worst performance that I've seen live since probably 2019, I reckon.
Yeah.
But at the risk of getting howled down from, I can feel Demonland Massive going, no, don't go into, is I was shocked actually, because I didn't realise Wheelo had put the numbers up, and so I only looked at the data for the match about an hour and a bit ago. So I was really, really surprised. Watching the game live, I haven't watched the replay, particularly when we're playing so poorly, is that I don't really get a good sense of the game at all. I'm too emotionally connected. And so, for instance, I thought 𝗟𝗏𝘀𝗁 played better than probably his numbers indicated, but that was only because probably I really like him and there's that confirmation bias. Similarly with track, you could have knocked me down with a feather when I saw his player ratings. I just can't help but think that there was some external factor going on. There were too many players playing way, way, way down below their best. There's a question about fitness, and I'll talk about a little bit of that sort of evident fatigue. We were evidently fatigued. The second question Goody got in the presser was about our fatigue levels, but I just wonder. It just felt a weird, the most depressing thing was our lack of fight in the last quarter and the way they were just bringing it out of the centre. But it never really felt like we were, it felt like we're in the match. I expected us to win that game at 3/4 time still. Though they were the better team. They did. I'm not saying that, I thought we played poorly. I thought they looked, my mate who I went to the footy with said, he said halfway through the second, this looks like 2 bottom 6 teams. Our disposal was poor, our effort was poor, but there was this doesn't sound like a positive, but it just felt like there was a funk going on. I don't know what it was. And so who knows, maybe track was carrying something, or maybe there was something else external. There was too many weird, like the energy was really poor, and that, it seems like it was too bad to be true, if that makes some sort of perverse sense.
Well, hopefully they can get out of whatever funk it is by Saturday. Yeah. All right, let's move on. And we're going to talk about the man that we've been talking about. Mandalorian says, I'm sure there'll be a lot of pile-on comments and questions this week, so I will contribute something positive. I thought Kate Chandler played a very good game this week. 25 possessions and 3 goals was our only shining light. Big man, you've talked a bit about him already tonight. There was a lot of criticism for Cade in the preseason off the back of some poor performances in the practice match and in round 1. He really was only our only beacon of hope, or one of the only beacon of hope. We've talked about a couple of others from a very dismal day. So that was good to see. Good to see him probably take on some of the feedback that he would have received from the coaches on board, and he really he did come out with a bit of fire this week.
He was fantastic, wasn't he? I'm just looking at the coaches' votes that came out. Did he get one? Yeah, he got a coaches' vote 1.
Oh, good.
Coaches' vote. Wouldn't shock me if that was from... I can never work it out. I'm always amazed at people who are able to work out who gave their votes to who.
Yeah. Sometimes you can sort of tell, you sort of know some coaches, but that might have been Goody just giving him a pat on the back. I don't know if Clarkson would have, unless he looked at he kicked 3 goals, I'll give it to him.
Well, and maybe one begets the other, but this is a good sort of, in a way, this is a good sort of pat in the back for the player rating system. The top rated player with 10 votes, the top rated player on the ground was Sherry. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Cherry.
He was bad. He was brilliant, leaving aside Max lethargy and his performance. Tristan Cherry was really brilliant. He was far from the cherry on top. And Powell got 20.6 points. He just carved us up. He got the second most votes. Comden didn't. He only got 9 points, but still pretty high. And I thought like we were giving him match marking practice. But Chandler and Oliver, who were our 2 highest scoring players, both got a coach's vote. And Chin, I thought, was just terrific in this game. He's predicted rating. There's a system they use a lot of data to work out what their likely score is in this match. His predicted rating was 9.2. So, just on a rubbery figure, is twice as good a game as he was predicted to have. 151 super coach points, 117 fantasy points. He time on ground 82% of the time, and in fact, so was 𝗟𝗏. Looking at that, that's big time for 𝗟𝗏, isn't it, George?
Yeah, but I think there are other things going on, and I'm not sure what. But yeah, I think 𝗟𝗏 had to be playing high numbers because others weren't.
Right. I'll have a look in a sec at what Track's numbers were. But
George? Sorry, what are you alluding to there? That some players weren't, or is that a fitness thing, or
look, I don't know whether it's fitness or not. It's round 2 for crying out loud.
Yeah, I know. That's the worry.
But players were not being utilised in their positions. Like Petrarca spent, and I'll talk about it later on. Petrarca spent the first 10 minutes of the last quarter in the forward line.
So maybe
the ball didn't go.
Well, maybe there was fitness or sickness or something. Maybe that's sort of more evidence of that stuff. So the other thing about Chandler was amazing was his meters gained. Now I made a note to myself at the game. Actually, the stats came up on the scoreboard. He had 290 odd meters gained at quarter time
early on.
Yeah, so he was like by far our best player right from the get-go. He ended up having nearly 600 metres gained for the match. And for a player who's playing, I know he played different positions, but essentially a high half forward, that's a hell of a lot. And he also had 10 contested possessions. This one, Wheelo's added to the numbers, which is great. He had 6 post-clearance possessions. And as I said, that's like coaches rate that as almost the most, it's up in the top 4 or 5 most important stats from a coach's perspective. He had 3 post-clearance ground ball gets. 𝗟𝗏, by the way, had 19 contested possessions. How's that? Yeah. 19 contested possessions in a game of footy is something quite remarkable, the most on the ground by 4. But, yeah, he had a fantastic game. I think the best game of his career, Chandler. So, and as I said before, I have huge respect for players who play well in when the team plays poorly. I really, really do. I rate that really highly, both from a character perspective and how I perceive them as players. And I thought he was just terrific.
I briefly looked while you were doing your stats files at Chandler's stats from last year when he had a couple of games where he kicked 3 or 2 or whatever. He had sort of had a bit of a purple patch at one stage, and in all those games he had 10 possessions or 11 or 12. So never had 20 possessions in one of those 3-goal sort of games. But he was playing obviously in a different type of role this week than he was as a crumbing small forward in those games.
And the other thing is that he kicked those goals. Like he kicked them. He went back and he kicked them. One was a hard kick, and it was like, yes, that's what we want, young man. I was thrilled with his game, and even looking at 𝗟𝗏's numbers, more thrilled now than I was live, to be honest.
And the other important thing about 𝗟𝗏's numbers is, if it wasn't for 𝗟𝗏's numbers, what would the rest have been like?
Yeah. That's yeah.
Red Jacket says our disposal was absolutely amateur hour, causing damaging turnovers. What made it all worse were there were many occasions where a player with the ball showed absolutely zero awareness of their surroundings and was caught holding the ball. So disheartening, and I just can't see us climbing out of this hole, and it's only round 2. Doug Remus says, something stinks on the field at the moment and it can't be explained by stats. We looked confused. How many times were we caught about to kick the ball? Seems like there is absolutely no talk out there or on-field leadership. We haven't looked this listless in a decade. You could see it last week. No one set up a zone when AJ had the last shot on goal in case he had missed. Ross Millen says, fumbles. Was it the pressure, conditions, or just pure bad skill? All is never as bad as it seems. We won the inside 50 count. Is there any hope we can improve our conversion? So, George, I honestly can't recall another period where, with this core group, or this era, if you want to call it that, where we've looked so indecisive with ball in hand. Combine that with some genuinely dreadful skill errors, poor decision-making. They mentioned it, a few of the posters, a complete lack of situational awareness, and perhaps even questionable attitudes. It's a recipe for disaster, and I know that you're not on the big man positive side of the scales, but you're not quite in the the sky is falling camp. You do provide some balance on this podcast. Did you see this as well? What do you think is behind it? Is it a lack of knowledge or confidence in the game plan, a skill deficiency, perhaps an attitude problem? Credit to North, they wanted them all, they hunted the ball, and they won by 10 goals, but...
I'm afraid I can't offer very much. There was definitely attitude problems in this game, right across the ground. You can understand if individual players have a bad game, but right across the ground, we struggled to find reasonable performers out of the 22 players who were supposedly the 22, 23 players there. The endemic problems keep on resurfacing. Goal kicking, yet again. There were opportunities where we could have put North away quite quickly in this game, and
we put them under pressure. That's the thing. They deserve to win, and we would, but goals put the opposition under pressure.
Absolutely, and how many times have we spoken about this over the last 2 years at least? Just straight, easy. They're not kicks from the pockets, although Turner did an absolute ripper from one pocket, but just the easy stuff. Max was the worst one of the lot, running into an open goal from 25 metres out. That was
with a beautiful bit of play as well.
And what that does to the team, you're hanging into a game, you're coming back, and all of a sudden there's a big opportunity to really put the knife into the opposition and completely fluffed. I watched the 𝗪cie game as well, and the Melbourne players there, even the ones who didn't play last week, there's no excuse for in the second round to say, and we'll talk about fitness, there's no excuse in the second round of a season to say you're unfit. You've had a pre-season.
And everyone's had a full pre-season.
And you can say, oh, yeah, well, the GWS game was a hard game. Well, the Melbourne players who played at 𝗪cie looked the same. Absolutely bereft of any sort of enthusiasm about the game.
I thought they were all right. The case I watched that game too, and I thought they fought back when they were down 15 points against the winning.
But it was the 𝗪cie players who did the fight back, not the Melbourne players.
I thought Langford was good in that last quarter. I thought Billings was good in that last quarter. I thought
we'll get to that.
Fullerton was good. I know he didn't play in round one, but
no.
I mean, I thought that we played all right in that game.
No.
Do you have anything to... Yeah, I'll go on, George, if you want to finish your call.
Yeah, it was just across the board. I didn't particularly like the way that we had a lack of leadership shown on the ground. I don't like people going high-fiving after someone's made a critical error in the game. You pat them on the head and you say, don't worry about it, mate, but you don't go around high-fiving, and we were doing that time and time again. There was something really, really missing in this game. I don't know what it is. I don't think that positioning of various players was helping in the slightest. It really does point to further problems occurring in the background that we're not aware of, the way that they played. So can't offer very much at all.
I mean, just a couple of things on that is that it's one of the challenges of transitioning from a model that is in ground from 2019 to the end of 2023. This is only, as I made the point, the case we're trying to shift our game plan last year.
I'll ask you a simple question, Matt. What was the game plan in this game? Because I didn't see any evidence of a game plan.
Well, I absolutely did. And we were trying to transition the ball from the back half. We were trying to move the ball. And so the answer to the question, to a degree, is that this is the problem it's a compounding problem of trying to implement a new game plan that is any game plan is based on systems and where you're supposed to be. Once you get a combination of older players who have played in a previous method, under pressure, when the team isn't performing well, you go back to what you know, you kick it long. For instance. But in the third quarter, they played on hardly at all. We played on 80% of the time. We were trying to move the ball quickly in that third quarter. We were trying to generate scores from our back half. We scored more this week from our back half than we did against Giants. You could clearly see what they were trying to do, George. They're trying to implement that game plan. 𝗪cie said as much. We had less focus on stoppages. We're not playing territory. So there's all this talk, for instance, about inside 50s. We won that count. We were winning that count 60-40 last year. We won it by 2. We were winning inside when we were playing in that game style everyone hates and criticised us for, and forward half game and trap it in the forward half that I'll bet you half the Melbourne fans would love to go back to. It was 60% in our forward half and 40% we were getting beaten. It was 50-50 again this week, just as it was last week. It was clear that what they were trying to do, it was evident to me that we were trying to implement the game plan that 𝗪cies been talking about. We didn't implement it at all effectively, hence the loss. But one of the big problems was, like those turnovers that we talked about. That turnover number is a direct correlation to trying to play through the corridor more often, to try and move quickly. In that third quarter, as I said, we played on, I think it was 80% of the time. They played on about 10% of the time from a mark. We looked to move the ball quickly. The problem is our skill errors, we turned the ball over. And then when we were under pressure in the last quarter, we reverted to a combination of an old style of play, kick down the line and kick to a contest, ignoring players out wide. 𝗪𝗏𝗏 got ignored by 𝗪cie a couple of times. So to me, it was like that's one of the challenges of implementing a new game plan. Under pressure, it will break down. Now, it cannot be underestimated who's not in this team. We've got two of our best 5 players not in the team at the moment. We've got our best kick in McVie not in the team at the moment. We've got Colt not in the team at the moment, who would have been in our best 22. We had Steve May, because as I said before, you take that quality. If you think that we haven't got we're going to struggle to implement something, you take 6-7 of your best 22 players out of your team. Doesn't matter what game plan you're going to have, you're going to struggle to implement it. Just like the Lions did last year, they had 6 or 7 of their best players out of the team. They lost their first 3. Just like the Pies did last year, similar story. They couldn't implement their running game plan when you took their best players out of it, and still can't. Same for multiple teams. So I could see what they were trying to do. They just couldn't implement it, or not effectively.
Youngblood says, I know I'll be unpopular, but I really think fitness played a big part in today's game. I think North outplayed us most definitely, but pretty much all the game, and especially in the third quarter, just about every one of our kicks was short. Every handball was to a teammate's feet. We're not the most skilled side, but we're certainly not that bad. I saw half of our side completely gassed each quarter with only Chandler and Oliver, who seemed fit enough to impact consistently and run the game out. Again, I know I'll be ridiculed, but I felt like the loss was compounded by the fact we weren't fit enough for this game, resulting in poor disposal, lack of spread, unforced turnovers, not working hard for each other in space, especially forward of the ball. Shouldn't ever be an excuse, but was obvious to me today that North were much more match fit for this one after we slogged away last week in the wet. Hoping they get the recovery and conditioning right this week. God help us. Lazy says, I also heard several times on the replay that the commentators referring to the hard game last week and fatigue. It was a grueling game, but I can't remember a time where the effects of a tough round 1 game were mentioned so much the week after. How are you supposed to sell hope to the fans if the team is knackered after round 1? Buddha82 says, echo the comments about our fitness. We couldn't run our quarters in round 1 and looked miles off it against an admittedly fair bit younger Roos side. As Goody said, we held up for 3 quarters and then the dam burst in the last. B-Man, as our resident loading expert, is it panic stations in the strength and conditioning department or just still blowing out the cobwebs? And conversely, Pipefitter says, the hallmark of that 2021 to 2023 team was we were always in the game because we would fight all the way to the end. Yesterday was alarming how we seemingly gave up against North of all teams in that last quarter. There's still too much talent in this team for results like this. You have to question the hunger to dig deep when the backs are against the wall at the moment. That's not fitness, that's being motivated and inspired. A few more efforts like this, and unfortunately for Goody, it's not going to end well for him. It's classic not playing for the coach areas. So, B-Man, do you have any concerns regarding our fitness level and our capacity to run out games? We were once the gold standard in terms of fitness, but I share some of the worries that have been expressed here. It's noticeable how spent that we seemed at the end of quarters. To me, that's particularly concerning this early in the season. How about you?
Well, I mean, I definitely had some concerns last year. I mean, we've talked about how hard it is to sort of get a handle on, on there's so little data about fitness. Just taking that last sort of point first, the pipe fitters point, like regardless of what I'm going to say after this is that our performance in the last quarter was appalling. And I think for me, that was what I meant by the worst we've played since 2013 live in terms of they're just waltzing it out of the centre. Like it was, it doesn't matter how stuffed they are. There's ways to slow that down and to hit harder or to. So that was concerning. So definitely, I mean, we definitely ran out of gas a little bit last week, I thought, which is not that surprising. Most teams do in their first game. We looked fatigued right from the get-go, which, maybe there was something going through the club. It happens in terms of something like gastro or COVID. I know I'm not wanting to put an excuse out there, but that we looked not like that was what that comment question from the journo was in the Thingo's presser. I think it was the second comment question he got. I haven't watched the replay, but it's interesting. They also said that during the live call, by the sound of it, that we looked, not switched on. What I'd say though is that it's not. I think it'd be really good to get like an expert in and talk the way the sort of football's evolved around fitness, because it's not like you get a certain amount of fitness points in the bank at the beginning of the season. There's your 100 points, and then that's how fit you are, and then that will take you through the season. football that's what I was sort of touching on before. Football was changing, and it is changing before our eyes. Fitness, leaving aside injury, fitness is now critically important. But it's not just fitness this side's fit. It's its ability to prepare each week. Now, it's just not possible anymore for the teams to be cherry ripe, 100% at their peak for every game. They have to plan ahead in a way that just didn't happen 15 years ago, and certainly didn't happen 30 years ago. Just didn't. You had your fitness, you maintained it through the season. They do so much running. I forget, what's the Hawthorn player who did his knee, the one who came across from Port Adelaide? Small forward.
Amon.
No, did his knee last year.
Impey.
No, not Carl. No, he's out at the moment with an ACL. I just can't think. He's a half forward, came from Port, went to Hawthorn. After he did his ACL, he went and did ABC radio, and he's on it still. And he's super smart, and I really, really like his insights. And obviously, he's still in the system. He's playing at the Hawks. I'm not sure if he retired or not, but it was a cruel injury. But anyway, he was saying on the radio on Saturday.
James Blank of the
No. I'll think of it in a sec. The Aboriginal
Mitch
player.
Lewis.
But he was saying how much running players have to do now is just off the charts. It's crazy. He was saying the young players coming through the draft, coming into their first season, one of the benefits that they have over older players is how fast they can run and how far they can run at a good clip. He says in his time, football has changed and put such a demand on players' ability to run. And the new players, he's specifically talking in the context of new players coming into the league, coming in with Burgoyne. That's it. Yeah, coming into the league with an advantage because of their sheer running power and the speed at which they can run, which is part of what his argument is. Why so many of them are performing at such a high level so early. And because of that factor, because of the games become such an incredibly running game, is that there will be huge variabilities in results. And so already this season, you look at some of the results. So previously you were getting sort of weird results during around the mid-season bye. So we talked about this the last few years on the podcast, all of these weird results. We're now getting them at the beginning of the season. This season's now mirroring the start of last season. As you fellas both know, I pun on footy a lot. One of my favourite bets of the beginning of each season for the first 3 or 4 rounds is over the total match points. So they set the line at normally 175, 180. It was 177 for the game yesterday. And for the total match point, both teams scored combined. If you put $100 on every one of those games so far, you'd be well into the profit because the scoring has been unbelievable. But you're having all of these weird, anomalous games already. So Geelong looked $1 million, absolutely $1 million against Freo. They were unbelievably dynamic. I'm not sure if either of you guys watched that game. I watched it. They were unbelievable. They blew Freo off the park. Come out and looked as flat as a tack. They looked like us against the Saints. Now, the only reason the Saints, they ended up getting close to the Saints is they, credit to the Cats, they did what we didn't do. They pushed through the pain barrier and somehow found a way to get back into that match, but they didn't win. And the Saints completely ran out of gas in the last quarter. It was a fantastic effort to win. My point being, 1 week, the Cats are looking like unbeatable. You couldn't beat them. They were so good against Freo and they were so dynamic and so physical. They were fast across the ground. The next week, they looked like they were running in concrete boots, right? So how to explain that? 161, Collingwood 1 week, scores 45 points and gets smashed up by who beat them? The Hawks? Was it the Hawks?
GWS.
GWS. GWS beat them by 55 points, I should say. The next week, they win by 90 points against Port, who come out, albeit against the Tigers, next week come out and flog the Tigers. There's increasingly weirdly anomalous results at the beginning of the season, in addition to the mid-season bye, which all goes back around to fitness. So that we can get a bounce this week and everyone will go, well, what was all that about? So I think we've got to start, that question, who was the original question from Youngblood. I think this is part of the problem, is that he felt the need, or they felt the need to I know I'll be ridiculed, but I felt like the loss was compounded by the fact we weren't fit enough for this game, resulting in poor disposal. So I think fitness is like, they're only going to be as fit as they are now, but his point about it being conditioned for each game is critical. Each game has to be planned, and they will emphasise the importance of some over the others, which is 100%. So one thing is that's the problem, is that he feels that he might be ridiculed for that. No way. That's exactly the way to look at it. It should be. It drives me nuts that this isn't brought into the analysis of the game and given more weight. It's hardly given any weight whatsoever. It is not an excuse. It's just one of the factors that should be considered. It is a reason. And once you change that a little bit and start recognizing it as a reason, then you can have a reasonable conversation about criticizing the strength and conditioning and high performance team. They can be one part of the problem, and they're also part of the solution. So I think we clearly were fatigued. Whatever the reason was, it wasn't just mental. I totally agree that we didn't fight through that. I totally agree that we were poor. There was a whole lot of, really subpar performance. I don't think Goody had a great night great day in the coach's box. I think there was, in hindsight, some selection. There were a lot of factors, one of which is the strength and conditioning team didn't have that team ready to rock against this ruse. Maybe because we put more emphasis on next week. I just don't think that they can prepare them fully wound up for every single game of AFL footy anymore. They just can't. And so the AFL don't want people talking about it. We are going to continue to get these weird results where, who was it? The Lions only beat the Eagles by 18 points. The Eagles got decimated last week and were woeful. You're just going to continue to get these weird results, I think, and this is one of them.
Garbo writes, do we put this down to missing personnel in May, Pickett and Windsor, or do we simply not have the personnel to play what has become the template for successful teams these days? Getting goals from our forward line as ever is an issue, but it feels like it's gone beyond that now. Has the game gone past our much vaunted midfield and backline as well? Dominion says, with Lever going off with an ankle injury and perhaps destined for a stint on the sidelines and May's return indeterminate, are we cooked in defence? And Scroll says, with May, Pickett, Windsor, Melksham and McVeigh out and little standout form from Casey, are cracks in our depth being exposed. And GS77 says, while we lost McAdam and AMW for the season, both have been replaced on our list and neither were best 22 locks, though AMW was threatening a solid year. So hopefully when the Cozzies, McVeighs, Melkies, Colts, etc. return, we'll have a reasonably healthy list with a decent fitness base. Roostifar says, I thought Lever and Jefferson going off when we were already missing May really affected our ability to change things up. I'd have loved to have seen Petty or T-Mac move forward, Turner move back, and Viney played as a small forward in the second half. At the start of the last quarter, I would have had Petrarca, Oliver and Lindsay in the middle. Anyway, injuries cruelled our ability to switch things up, and I think we saw that Sharp and Woden are still VFL players. So, George, if anything, the injuries, suspensions and poor form affecting key players have exposed our lack of depth, and I suppose that every club faces similar issues, and when you remove a certain number of important players, weaknesses become obvious. So no club's immune to that reality. Do you think that's exactly what we're experiencing right now, a lack of depth?
I think we've experienced actually for the last 4 years our premiership side players are 4 years older for a start. I don't know that there's a great number of them have taken huge steps forward in the intervening years, but certainly the talent that we've had that got us over the line in 2021, the serious end talent that we have is now 4 years older, and I don't know that they're playing any better than what they were there, but the depth is really, really starting to tell. I thought at the start of the year we'd solved a few of those problems. We got a backup ruck for the first time since Majak Dor left and Jackson left. We picked up 2 fantastic draft picks who solved a couple of our ongoing problems, but we've also lost a lot of players. For example, in 2021, players who didn't play in the grand final team, Jaden Hunt, Nathan Jones, Neville Jetta, Majak Dor, Toby Bedford, James Jordan, Mitch Brown, Melcham, and Laurie. You compare those players who are sitting from player number 22 to about player number 30 with what we've got available today. We'll talk about trading as well. Our trading has been subpar since then. We've lost players we've traded in with 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀, McAdam, Billings, Grundy, Hunter, and Fullerton, none of whom were playing in the game on the weekend. These were the players who are meant to fill the gaps as other players retire or you have injuries. The players that we've given away, Hunt, who's played 43 games with West Coast, Jordan, 21 with Sydney, Bedford, 42 with GWS, even Oscar Baker with 19 at Footscray. Jackson, of course, has played 44 at Fremantle. Neal-Bullen's already playing games at Adelaide. We just haven't replaced the players that we've lost. The trading hasn't picked up the gaps, and we've lost so many players from that 21 side with an ageing list at the moment. In all honesty, we'll talk about the 𝗚cie game as well. There's not too many down there putting their hands up to be selected in the first.
B-Man, did you want to add anything before I move on?
The
depth.
Yeah, it's a bit of a chestnut. I just think that I personally think it's a big 𝗟𝗶𝗀𝗀𝗀. The whole discussion about depth is a complete 𝗟𝗶𝗀𝗀. Is that you mentioned those players who didn't play in the grand final in 21. That's why we won the grand final in 21, because our depth wasn't tested. If you're not using your best, this is my view, if you're not using your best 22 players, if you have to use your best non-best 22 players, you aren't winning flags as a rule. The reason why we won in 21 because of those players you mentioned, Majak Dor, please, Hunt, please, Jonesy. They all played during the year, of course. But at the moment, as I said, we've got 6 or 7 of our starting 22 out. That's a third of our best team out. Not a single team in the AFL could cover that at the moment. It's just a fact. Like, if you took Brisbane's 6 or 7 best players out of their team, then they would struggle. Same with the Giants.
They had a number of players out in last year's grand final.
They had 2 or 3 of their best out. One maybe, arguably. They had borderline
Ruckman,
players
who they
out.
lost
So
the
point being is that depth is great. Wonderful to have a strong VFL team, but teams aren't winning a flag if they've got too many of their non-best 22 players playing. And that's why in 21 we won the flag, because our depth wasn't tested. We had a phenomenal run with injuries that year, which is why we won the flag. Simple as that. And as I said, we have 6 or 7 of two of our best 5 players, Cos and May, no question, 2 of our top 5 players not playing in this match. Who are their best players against the Roos? You take those 2 out, they struggle. We have McVie, key to the way we want to play is having players who can kick the ball accurately. 2 of our best 5 kicks, Cos and McVie, weren't playing in that game. So it's very difficult to implement a game based on minimising turnovers when you haven't got your best players playing. So, of course, it's handy to have good players, in running around the twos. Is our depth as good as other clubs? I think it's probably on a par. I just think it's a really sort of a 𝗟𝗶𝗀𝗀𝗀, as a general thing. And I actually thought that, we'll talk about the 𝗚cie game later. I actually thought there were some pretty good performances from the 𝗚cie boys.
Dice writes, another game lost at the selection panel. God knows how many games that is now that in the last 3 years lost in this manner. Must play 2 rucks against the best, Sherry, Witts, etc. Why on earth is our first draft pick playing in the twos? Lefty says, Goody alluded to Max having personal issues in regards to his performance. All that aside, do you think we should have gone with a genuine second ruck this week? Granted, AJ was out suspended, but do you think it's time Max had some real support? B-Man, we've debated this extensively about the need for a full-time second ruck, and I think we're all 3 of us are aligned in not wanting JVR to shoulder that responsibility, and clearly AJ's suspension forced our hand, leaving Roo to step into that role this week. However, we did have the option of bringing Tom Campbell in, who performed very well against North in that practice match that we all went to, albeit they had two genuine ruckmen. They had two genuine ruckmen on that day. In this game, our shortage of tall forwards became even more apparent when Jefferson went down very early, especially with JVR occupied in that second ruck role. And considering all this, should we have selected Campbell given AJ's absence? And moving forward, is there still room in our side for a dedicated second ruck, or are we just comfortable reverting to AJ as that forward ruck once he's available again?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because we talked about it last week. We were correct. There's no way that they were going to run a second ruck in, and I was, you run 𝗪cie. But a point George has made before in previous seasons is the player type that he struggles against most in terms of a ruck opponent are those big fellas. And Sherry's a monster. He's massive. And I don't know what the deal was, whether 𝗪cie was fatigued or coming into the match or what, but he monstered. I haven't seen that happen to 𝗪cie for a long time. Physically monstered, capped off by that goal he ripped out of the air, from a ruck contest. Pretty sure that was against Max, wasn't it? So the case could be made to potentially, who's the ruckman for the Suns this week? Is it
𝗪cie?
He's a big fella
as well.
He's a big lump of a lad as well.
He's the tallest one in the league.
Yeah, so maybe there is a case to be made for giving 𝗪cie a chop out, and particularly if there was any concern about his mindset, which we'll get to later. But of course, none of us knew that. I think AJ. Well, I mean, just like we talked about last week, AJ's sort of effort in that game against the Giants. It's exactly what we missed up forward. I don't know what since I've given JVR a rap and Turner a rap, they've both gone south. I don't know. JVR was misreading the ball inside. There wasn't a wind problem, and Turner kept on getting pushed off the ball. So the other one is 𝗪cie. Is that I want 𝗪cie to do well. I want all the players to do well, but he just doesn't seem to have tricks and he's just, critical fumbles. I don't know, was he the best? I understand Langford going back and giving him a full game playing inside mid, but, it seemed a bit of a vanilla choice as sub, I thought. So maybe Campbell would have been the go to give him a chop out. It would have been great because, we all were at that practice game. Campbell was awesome against Sherry in that match. So, they match up perfectly in some ways, both strong, big fellas, and maybe allow Max to be a permanent forward and take JVR off the ground. Or I know we're a bit hamstrung when Jefferson came off as well. That didn't help our rotations and obviously our key forwards. But I don't know that we didn't lose it at selection. We lost it with our effort and application. And deservedly so. That last quarter was, as I said, a nightmare. The other big problem, I don't know if we've got a question, sorry, Andy, if I have to just touch on it, is that I have as much as the talk about our forward line, I have more concerns about our back line at the moment because I don't think we're adjusting at all to as well as they'd hope in terms of stopping flow, stopping that ball movement. It really worries me. And it's, again, another small, medium forward. What's the fella's name who kicked 3 goals for them?
Curtis.
No, Curtis. Another one of those small mediums who cuts us up. Forget 𝗟𝗓. We just don't seem to have the player who can shut them down. And to be honest, the other thing that was really highlighted how much we missed Petty getting outmarked a couple of times. He took a couple of nice marks.
He took a couple of nice marks, yeah.
But, 𝗪cie's a gun, total gun. Yeah. 𝗪cie is an absolute gun. But nonetheless, he got outpointed and it was outbodied, outread, So, I have some concerns down back.
And particularly this week, and we'll get into it a bit later, if Lever's out, and it looks like he probably will be.
Well, I don't know how bad is it.
We don't know. He had the ankle. He's got glass ankles though. He had that last year a few times.
Well, they will look to run. If we don't have Lever, don't have Mayo.
It's a problem. So we'll talk about it later.
If not 𝗪cie, I don't know who else could have come in as we talked about. But
that's depth. That's called a depth. That's called a depth problem.
Well, or you could also call it an injury problem. You know,
Yeah,
Laurie was the next emergency,
and same category as well.
and then Langford was the number 3, I think.
So we have got,
Langford
as I said, it just has to be noted, we've got 7 of our best 22 out, and the fella one of the fellas we brought in to cover and that's on top of losing AMW. Who wasn't probably best 22, but we hoped he was going to be, exactly for that reason, for the small medium, and for McAdam, who was in a lock, as I understand it, for round 1 with Cos out. We get someone on the long-term injury, we bring him in, and they get injured in 𝗟𝗃. How long's he out for? So,
2 or 3 weeks still.
We've got some significant injury concerns, haven't we?
Yeah. Demon Cat writes, a raft of issues this week that I'm sure will be spoken about at length, and we already have. But one thing in particular I'd like to hear the panel's thoughts on is the move of Ed Langdon to a centre bounce attending midfielder. To me, it is an absolute disaster class, I like that word, in tactics to move one of the most reliable wingmen in the comp to the midfield at almost 30 years of age. Ed was routinely outpositioned and unable to affect contests, and any benefit his aerobic capacity might bring is lost when he constantly sat back and allowed North's mids to get 3 or 4 steps on him, although he wasn't alone in that regard. The slap in the face is that we have Trent Rivers, a player who has played in there for half of last year and trained there all summer, and Harvey Langford, a genuine mid already racking them up at 𝗟𝗄𝗃, ready and able to step into that role without using band-aid solutions like bringing in Langdon. I know Goody has strengths as a coach, but his personnel and positioning decisions are baffling at times, and it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence going forward. So, George, it was an intriguing idea over the summer, but now in the cold, hard light of day, what are your early impressions of the experiment of playing Langdon, our premiership wingman, in the midfield?
It's not working. Midfielders are meant to be able to get the ball. Langdon's strengths are not about in and under. His strengths are running. And he's an 800-metre type runner. He runs all day up and down. Well, that's not what the midfielders have to do. They have to be in and grunt, get the ball. And I think it's been an absolute disaster. It's not utilising the best skills of Langdon and others like Rivers not getting actually in there when they're probably a better option. It's not the only confusing thing that I couldn't understand in this game. I mentioned before, Langdon was actually positioned at centre-half forward at the very first bounce. What the hell is he doing there? If the ball comes out of the centre, is he going to outmark Comden or someone like that? Absolutely not. If he was at centre-half back, yes, you can understand that, because if we were to get possession, he can run past and utilise his running skills. Centre-half forward? No, thanks. I think we have lost a lot of tactical nous when we lost 𝗟𝗏𝘀𝗁𝘀 in the coaching box. I'll give you another example of something that's was very wrong in this game. 5 minutes before the end of the third quarter, JVR was put on the bench as part of the rotations, so he didn't come back on until the final quarter. So he's had 5 minutes off there, the whole of the third term break. He comes back on in the fourth quarter. Petrarca's put in JVR's put in the forward pocket. JVR's put it full forward. The ball didn't go down the forward line for the first 7 minutes. So JVR wasn't involved with any play whatsoever for the first 7 minutes of the final quarter, in addition to the last 5 minutes of the third and the three-quarter time break. And then he's subbed off. He's taken off the ground, not having run a single yard effectively, because the ball kept going up the other end and North was scoring goals. Petrarca then goes into the middle. Gawn goes off the continues the next ruck. JVR comes on, goes into the ruck for a further 3 minutes, and Gawn comes back on again. What is going on? Why would you take a guy off the ground who actually hasn't played in any competitive component of the match for probably 15 or 20 minutes? I think what's happening is that we're following computer programs rather than looking at what's going on the actual ground. And
they're not being flexible.
As a real comparison, go back to the 2021 grand final when Burgess came up to Goody and said, we should be taking Jackson off now. Should we do it? And the answer was no, let him run, effectively, because Burgess was watching what was going on the ground and building the rotations around that. So I don't know what's going on with that sort of thing. It just meant we weren't utilising our best players. And then, of course, when the ball goes down forward line, who have we got? We've got no one. Petrarca's gone into the middle. JVR's gone off. Then into the ruck, and we've got no one left in the forward line. Not surprising what happens.
Hey, man, I don't know if you're talking because you're muted.
No, good. Yeah, nothing to add.
Because I can't see your face, you can't see your mouth with the way your camera's positioned. So you could have been talking. No, that's all right. That's fine. All right, let's move on. I'll take your point, George. I think they're going on a thing, and as what you were saying about the 2021 Grand Final, if the current people were in, I think they would have taken Jackson off because the computer program would have said he's coming off now. When does our Witch's Hat writes? When does our list manager come under scrutiny? In 2021, we had May, Lever, Ben Brown, Langdon and Hibberd play in a premiership. Adam Tomlinson might have two if he hadn't done his knee. Also on the list were 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀𝗁, who has been more than serviceable, Majak Dore and Mitch Brown, who were never going to be more than depth players. Since then, it's been Luke Dunstan, Brodie Grundy, Lockie Hunter, Josh Schache, Jack Billings, Shane McAdam, Tom Fullerton, Tom Campbell, Harry Sharp and Jai Culley. I'll give the last three an exemption as it's early days, although Sharp has showed nothing in 2 games. But the other 7 have collectively added absolutely nothing to our list. Did we get lucky between 2017 and 2021? El Diablo writes, the mind boggles why we were not able to bring in some A-grade talent while being premiership fancies. And then we had a bit of back and forth from a number of posters, Godees, Doug Reamer, Demons won, and yes, it was a win for the ages. But for brevity, I won't read it all out. B-Man, is it too early in our demise to start the post-mortem?
It's very early in the day. I mean, I will say, as much as, like you lose a player like Nibbler's quality, is I was hopeful Sharp would be, it's hard to replace it. It's hard to bring in good players. I just think it's all a bit overblown. Like the players that he mentioned, the question mentions who are Dunstan, Grundy, Schache, list management.
Billings.
Again, it's like because we have this hyper focus on Melbourne. I mean, this is Brisbane's list. How well do people know players like Shadow Brain, Dara Joyce, Bruce Reville, Reece Torrent, Noah.
Are these guys they drafted, or are these guys they've traded?
That some are traded, some are drafted. 𝗟𝗏𝗀 these are some mostly. Darcy Fort was traded in. He played in the grand final. So every club, every single Ty Gallop. I mean, every single club. Henry Smith, who's got drafted.
I think you're just making names up. They sound like made up.
Exactly. Every club, all of these players. Who have the Lions brought in? The Lions brought in what's his name?
Lockie Neal.
Lockie Neal. Yeah, they brought in Lockie Neal. But outside Lockie Neal, who else?
Danaher.
So we brought in Steve May and Lever.
Yeah,
but the question is talking about since then.
That's the same time frame. Who have the Lions brought in the last couple of years? Who did they bring in from another club this year?
Well, you'll have to ask.
What frustrates me is this sort of stuff as if Melbourne's a team in a bubble. So, yes, you can point to those 2 players, no one else. Melbourne brought in Lever, May and Langdon, probably the 3 best recruits for Melbourne.
That was before
the same period.
That was before our current list manager.
Well, but whatever the case, that wasn't the question. It wasn't a criticism of Tim Lamb. That was about why can't we attract quality players? Because quality players don't move that often. We brought in there's 3 quality players right there. The rest are list fillers, just like the ones I just read out for the Lions. They're list fillers. You've got to fill 44 players on your list. right? Only 22 of them are realistically, 25 tops are going to be AFL standard best 22 players. That's just how it is at every single club. And if you get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of your best 22 not playing games of footy, you are not winning games of AFL footy. So I just think all of that stuff is, again, I'll put that in the 𝗣cie basket.
The first line of the question was, when does our list manager come under scrutiny? I think it was quite clear on what the question is, but it's too early, but yeah, we might need to
let's see. Let's see how it all pans out. But it is hard to bring in quality players from other clubs. As I said, I just asked about Lions, who won the flag last year. Who did they bring in? Yes, they brought in Lachie Neale and Dano. Outside of that, who else?
We're not Brisbane fans. I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah, but like, Hawthorn brought in two, like they did what we did with Bay and Lever.
They did what we did, and both are great. Both, don't get me wrong, Barras and they brought in Frosty. Frosty's
that was in
exactly. It just doesn't Burgoyne from before, but it just doesn't happen that often. You don't get that many good players going from one club to another, particularly in this era of contracts of 6, 7, 8, 9 years. It just doesn't happen anymore. It's not the 1970s.
So some of the conversation that we didn't include, because it was a bit too long. The arguments that a couple of the posters were having were saying we didn't bring in a quality forward or a forward that some of the other clubs, there was not that we're going to bring in Jack Darling, who
we tried to get Lynch and we couldn't land him.
Membry, like guys like that were available. I don't know if we had a crack.
Membry, are you kidding me? Membry, and people are going to criticise.
He kills us every time.
Membry, I mean, give me a spell.
He'd probably be playing this week.
He played all right last week too. So
but he'd be playing for us this week. The Houston thing fell apart, reportedly, but then we probably wouldn't have got Lindsay.
We wouldn't have got Lindsay then.
Yeah. All right. Pingu writes, the loss was so deflating. We're 0-2 now, coming up against a rested Gold Coast who will be tasting blood in the water. Is it panic stations at 0-3? What about after the trip down the highway to Geelong and potentially 0-4 before we head to Gather Round in Adelaide to face off against the other wooden spoon hopeful, the Bombers? What happens at 0-5? I won't mention the match after that. You get the picture. It's bleak. I think this guy's channeling me. Cody's counters with, Melbourne were very disappointing today, but the overreaction of Demon supporters feels even more frustrating. Most years in the last 50, round one hasn't even started for another few days. There's so much season left, and it wouldn't surprise me if some coaches have been tweaking their programs to ensure their teams are peak fitness somewhere around late August rather than burning out in July. We've had one shocker from 2 games, and it feels like most supporters are now backing us for the spoon. Don't forget that the Lions lost their first 3 last year. They improved. Why can't we? In 2020, Richmond came back from the post-round 1 COVID hiatus and scored only 5 goals, 6 in a draw against Collingwood. They were expected to beat and then were almost ridden off after losing to the previous season's 9th and 14th by 5 and 4 goals the next 2 games with more low scores. Supreme Demon says, games like today shame the entire Melbourne Football Club. I thought we were supposed to be improving this year. Those 6 goals in 6 minutes by the Kangaroos against us were totally embarrassing. While there were some absolute howlers by the umpires, the Demons look like a bottom 4 side and not a top 4 side. What can Simon Goodwin do to rectify these serious issues? Alarm bells are certainly ringing, in contrast to the phones in the Melbourne membership department, which shall not be ringing much at all this week. So, George, is a panic stations an overreaction, and can we turn it around?
Certainly not an overreaction to see the results of this game. They're pretty plainly obvious for everyone. I don't know that much can be changed other than bringing in more capable players. I hope that they will add something to us. Certainly, we're desperately missing 𝗍𝗶𝘀𝗁, both in the middle, around the middle, and up forward. The problem is there were so many players absolutely down in this game. I don't know how you're going to get, 15, 16 players up to a suitable standard to be able to compete seriously from what we saw on the weekend. So I honestly do not know what is possible. I still don't think there is a game plan that is executable for the players that we've got. We don't have the runners off the half-back line that we need to be able to execute that sort of game plan. So, yeah, I don't see a great deal of improvement coming at all.
Speaking of which, again, like if you want to execute a back half transition game plan and you take your fastest half-back flanker out of the team, you take your best half-back flanker out of the team, 𝗍𝗶, you're going to struggle. You take your fastest player over the ground in 𝗍𝗲, you're going to struggle. And, of course, your key defender, you're going to struggle. What was interesting about this, I mean, it goes to the point I was saying before, is you can't see it. But so what happens next week? We come out and we're running on top of the ground and we beat the Giants and we score heavily from the back half and transition. What then? How do we then look back at this game? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but let's say it does in exactly the same way Saints did it to the Cats after being humiliated the week before. How do we then look back at this game? So that's I'll just put that in a bubble. And one of the things that for fitness, as I was saying last week, it's really hard to see. There's so little data about this. But the one thing that is reliable in terms of having publicly available data that gives some insight into their, not so fitness is the wrong word, their conditioning and readiness for a game of footy is when we're running on top of the ground and we run out games, we almost always dominate in these stats. So total distance covered was 𝗍𝗶𝗰𝗀𝗀, and we only had 2 of the top 5 total distance covered. High speed, we did all right. Sharp was in, but the total, they ran 20 more kilometres than us in total for the match. 20 more kilometres in a game of footy. And I've been tracking these numbers for ages. That's phenomenal. Maximum average speed there. Stevens was the average speed. Total sprints. 3 of the top 5 and the top 2 total sprints were the Roos. Repeat sprints, the same story. And the work rate, their work rate in defence was the real damning stat. In defence, average speed in defence, that's how it works out. So they define this as work rate. It's defined as it's a way of tracking their work rate. 4 of the top 5 players on the ground, average speed in defence, were Roos players. And when we're running on top of the ground and beating teams, we almost every time have 5. We have all 5 of those players, or at least 4 of them. Sharp was the only player in the top 5 for Melbourne, average speed in defence. That is whether that's effort, whether that's psychological, whether that's fatigue and the conditioning, they didn't get it right, whatever the case, they're really anomalous numbers. And if we see those numbers turn around next week, it'd be good to revisit, how this game.
Sam6172 writes, I was going to leave this one and just listen in, but after what I've just seen, I felt the need to post. Just saw a video of some Demon supporters hurling abuse at the Ds as they walked off the ground. WTF, D supporters, we are better than that, surely. I know we saw a bit of that in the dark years, but I honestly thought we were past that. I'm sure no one on this good forum could possibly be so dense as to participate in this behaviour. I understand the frustration at losses. Believe me, I didn't love that game either. But to hurl abuse at the players who looked completely heartbroken at what had just occurred left me feeling sick. Obviously, things need to be fixed. Possibly things are going on to affect their performance also. There is more to life than footy. Get a grip. And Jane02 replies, couldn't agree more. Absolutely disgusting behaviour. This person should get named and shamed. The players don't go out to lose each week. And whilst it wasn't the result we wanted, far from it, hurling abuse like that is not okay. Delightful Play replies, I'd say they should be suspended from attending the next 3 games or so. We're not Carlton or Pies supporters. Now, I'm going to play the audio from the footage. For context, there's a D supporter leaning over the race from above, directly shouting at the players, calling them a disgrace, and you'll clearly hear that. And towards the end of the video, if you do happen to see it, it's on Twitter and other social media things, you can see both Tracker Max absolutely staring daggers at the person hurling the abuse. So, yeah, here it is.
In the room! You're embarrassing! Absolute embarrassing! Permission or not! You're an embarrassment! Put your hand in your ass! Embarrassing! Come on! Embarrassing!
Yeah, so for full disclosure, I run a message board where emotions can and do run very high, especially in game day or post-match threads following the losses like this week's or during the season during seasons where we've struggled to be competitive. And as a forum and moderation team, we actively discourage abusive behaviour. Our preference is always for constructive criticism. And we do take steps to moderate comments that cross the line into personal attacks or direct abuse, and we do deal with offenders appropriately. And occasionally inappropriate comments do slip through, but overall abuse, as I said, isn't tolerated, and we act promptly whenever that we become aware of it. And on anonymous forums like Demonland, people sometimes feel emboldened to say things they'd never say if their real names and faces were attached. And yet it's also shocking how even on social media platforms where users openly share their identities, they've got their workplaces and their content can be seen by family and friends or work colleagues. Some people still engage in abusive, libelous, racist or sexist language without restraint. And many of these platforms online remain largely unmoderated, unlike Demonland, making them the Wild West of online communication. So this type of behaviour that we just witnessed or you just heard does exist openly elsewhere as well on written form. Like I see examples on Facebook and Twitter following poor performances. And our forum certainly isn't perfect, but we do our utmost, as I said, to moderate responsibly. And the difference in this incident, though, is that this supporter directed his abuse right at the player in person. And I guess would he have been so bold without the safety of a 10-foot barrier between himself and the team? Would he have said that directly face-to-face with Max or Track? Probably not. So, B-Man and then George, what are your thoughts on this incident?
I hadn't heard that. I'm not on any social media other than assume Demonland. Is that social media?
Well, it's a form of early 90s, 2000s social media.
That's the only social media I look at. So I hadn't seen that. You can
imagine what it is. I don't know if you've seen the Carlton ones and the Collingwood one. Yeah.
Look, as all three of us have barracked for Melbourne for a long time, and whole seasons where we win one game, two games.
Yeah.
So I know all about painful losses. I know about painful seasons. We all do. One of my pet hates is ever since I started following footy, ever since I started going to the footy by myself at 10, because no one I knew barracked for Melbourne and no one was interested in footy in my family. My pet hate, and I get amongst it, like I like yelling out of the footy. I just hate fans who knock their own players, let alone that sort of abuse. That is in a whole different stratosphere. It's pathetic. So if you're a D's fan and happen to be listening to this podcast because you're a rusted on D's fan, you should be ashamed. It's not really a Melbourne Football Club thing. I think it's equally across. It's pathetic when you see it when other clubs do it. I think it's a people thing. If you think you've got the right to abuse someone because whatever reason, there is no justification for it. I don't care how passionate you are. I may not sound it in terms of being not as riled up about this loss as some others, but, you don't get much more passionate than me. I've been following the club passionately for 45 years. I would not go to a game of footy again if I ever lost it like that. That is pathetic. And there's kids around. It is just, it is unacceptable. And I hate it. It reflects poorly on Melbourne Football Club. But, hopefully, was he wearing? Was he wearing red and blue? He should bloody not be.
He couldn't really sort of, I'll have to go look at the vision again, but it was sort of someone was filming him but not directly and focusing the camera on the players walking and most were ignoring it. But as I said, a few like Gorn and thing.
Pathetic.
But, there's constructive criticism, which you get on our forum. And as I said, we try to get the abuse out of the way because it does happen. And
constructive criticism is constructive criticism. I'm not a fan of the whole this player's a spud or the
we don't like that's not tolerated. We get rid of that stuff when we see it.
But that's another level.
It happens.
On a more positive note, one of the things as a flag when we talk about the practice games, I've got a real soft spot for the Roos and always like the Roos. Saw a lot of the games in the 70s and so I've got a lot of sympathy for the Roos fans who have struggled so mightily in the last 10 years or so. So on a positive note, I was really happy for the Roos fans yesterday, if it sounds a bit stupid. And that sort of Pillock that, he there's lots of Roos fans who have been there and hope, I didn't see much of that from Roos fans. Certainly not not yesterday. You know what I mean? But, you take your time, you take your losses. It's a sport. So
it's, it was pretty hard to listen to. It was like listening to a coach's address post-match in the 1960s or 70s, just ridiculous ranting that wasn't needed at all and did nothing for anybody. The real danger with something like that is, as fans, we enjoy access to players. We can, lean over the fence. We can see the action right up close. If people start doing that sort of thing, what we'll start to see is exactly what we're seeing at the soccer, where fans are fenced in behind barbed wire fences. They're coached to the ground to avoid contact with other teams. We'll see the situation even that's starting to develop in NRL, where players have to come out through a blow-up race to avoid contact with fans, particularly afterwards. These are the sort of things that that sort of actions will lead to. You'll lose your access to the fans on the very fortunate basis that we have today. So, the less of that sort of thing we don't want, even less. We don't want any of that sort of thing occurring, because everybody is going to suffer as a result of it.
And the kids, it's funny you should mention that, George, because I was on the train afterwards, Southern Cross, and it was packed full of Roos fans who, as I said, I was happy for them, and, but a whole bunch of Melbourne fans, little kids, a whole bunch of Roos fans, little kids, women, people from, different backgrounds, all on the train, no dramas, no hassles, a lot of disappointed Melbourne fans, a lot of up and about Roos fans. And, I thought that's one of the great things about the sport, that you can go along, as you said, is that what we want, fenced off like in soccer? I was listening to someone who was a mate of mine who's went to soccer games in England, and the way from the station, they funnel people from, one half of the ground is one set of fans, and then, from the train station, they just stop the road and say, this fan group's going through here, and then they take them on different routes to the, I know that's a long boated draw from this guy yelling over the thingo, but, when you've got a whole bunch of little kids there, you've got, who wants to, that's just such poor behaviour.
Yeah. I'm not saying it. Go ahead, George.
Sorry, we had a relative from Holland staying who was a mad soccer fan there, and she was terrified about going to an AFL game until she saw what was happening.
Yeah,
there were, as a woman going to a soccer game, it was something that was a real worry to her. And you're sitting next to an opposition fan. She was really, really worried. And the contrast with what AFL provides to us compared to what soccer does and even other sports is dramatic. But you don't, and all that happens, some idiot like that will throw something one day.
I was going to say,
and then in the AFL will have to respond, and the clubs will have to respond. Thank you very much. That's the way it heads. So
as soon as something like that happens, a projectile is thrown over one of those things and hits a player, or nearly does. It'll be a barrier over that thing.
Yep.
I'm surprised it's not already.
Andy, if your friend had been sitting next to that person going off, she wouldn't be thinking that. She'd be thinking, this is exactly what I feared. And, it's hopefully, I don't know if there's any, he didn't break any rules, did he? But, there's nothing he could be charged for. But presumably there's footage of him.
Yeah. Let's get to another weird comment. Goody on Gawn. Travy14 writes, what are your thoughts on Goody bringing up the Gawn issue? I thought that was a mistake, and after a year of being in the media spotlight, this dragged us straight back in. And I assume he asked Max and hope all is okay, but thought that should be out of the media was a strange thing to say. And Fiona from Facebook says, hi guys, love your podcast. Try to listen each week, but dare say I will not be this week. I started meditating 5 years ago, and it won't surprise you that one of the reasons was to stop my negative thoughts about our beloved D's. Turns out it was a good idea to enroll in an advanced course, which starts this weekend. I'm not going to go on about what I witnessed yesterday afternoon. It would make me sick. What I will say is Goody has to be criticised for his performance in the aftermatch presser in reference to Mac's backstory. What an utter disgrace. True or not, it wasn't the time or place. It just smacked of a coach with no answers to what happened on the field and our beloved captain being beaten soundly. I'm not a fan of Goodwin, and this just makes me sick. It did Goodwin, our club, and our supporters no favours. What a terrible comment. Your thoughts? And now we'll play the clip from Goody's post-match presser where the interaction occurred.
Just on a personal note, it's not often you see the captain lose a ruck duel. How was he post-match? I imagine, did that dent his pride a little bit, the skipper? He's not, like, they're a little club within the comp.
Yeah, they are.
They're competitive.
Yeah, and, our people are really important to us, and Max is one of those guys. And today, I think he'll acknowledge that he got beaten by a really good opponent today. But you also got to realise that, in life, there are other things that are going on. So, we'll support Max. He's a great person. He's a great leader. And, there's a backstory to everyone's performance. And Max is someone that we take enormous pride in, and he's going to continue to be a great leader for this footy club, and he'll be a big part of our response.
There's an obvious follow-up question there. Can you go?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to go into the details, but he's someone that there's footy and there's some stuff in life, and we just got to understand that people have backstories, and he's someone that we love dearly, and he'll certainly be a big part of our response.
And look, I don't know if Goody had Max's approval about mentioning that, or before mentioning that public. I've seen Tom Morris online today say that Max had no heads up about it, but that's coming from Tom Morris, so grain of salt and all that. To me, it seemed like Goody made the comments with good intentions, trying to provide context for Max's mindset as a reason for his poor performance. Now, if Max was okay with that, that's fine. But the way I saw it, I think Goody was just attempting to explain the situation without fully considering the potential consequences, especially the inevitable speculation from a rabid media, that's keen to seize on anything like this. And also, he probably also didn't take into consideration the spotlight that it's now going to place on what appears to be a very private matter. And we're obviously not going to speculate here about what the private matter is. But the fact is, we're discussing it. Social media is buzzing about it. There are articles appearing in the print media, and it's been being debated on radio. All of this could have easily been avoided if Goody had just simply said, like at the start, when he first said Max had a bad game and against a very good opponent, and he wasn't alone in playing poorly, and there'll be a significant part of the response next week. End of story. It would have prevented unnecessary pressure and attention. And in my view, unless it was pre-planned, I don't think it was, very careless thing to say. George, followed by B-Man, and for your thoughts.
Yeah, really can't add any more to that. It's really total foot-in-mouth disease, that particular one. It was not necessary, just should have said, as you've suggested, Max had a bad game, that was enough. Some things do not need to be brought into the public domain. It's you throw the chicken feed out in front of the media and they'll run straight for it. The follow-up question was totally expected, because that's exactly what you'd expect from the media, having been given that little tidbit.
And it means that next week, if Max has a bad game, it's that's
yeah. It was. I'd just like to thank Fiona from Facebook. Sounds a bit like Chris from Camberwell or Ivan from Ivanhoe, but as Melbourne supporters,
not listening anyway.
But I think Fiona from Facebook made a lot more sense than the other two.
I've got some sympathy for Goody for talking himself into trouble. I've done it many times where, bin man, that's it, stop now and keep going. But it
was good intentions.
With Goody, for 10 years, he's been playing a dead bat at bloody press conferences and talking about learnings and speaking in non-speak, and he finally perfected the art of he's never been a natural media performer. And now I had to laugh, well, not laugh. There's not been another video from his kitchen this week, has there?
No.
I don't think won't see any more of those.
The comms team must have, suddenly he becomes this media performer. He's on, fortnightly on 360 on Wednesdays, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
It was unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. And the first I saw of it was a headline in the thing, because I hadn't even watched the presser yet. I hadn't watched any footage. I still haven't. I watched his presser. That's all I've watched of the game is his presser. And I watched it in the context of what the hell did Goody say? And then I watched it and thought, well, Goody, what are you doing? Like, he voluntarily put it out there. What you said was just where you draw the line. And the obvious follow-up question, and what I reckon Goody's lucky. Like, if that had been Bevo and there'd been a more senior journo in there, they would have had every right to go at him harder and say, look, come on, you can't put, and unpack that. It was almost his wording.
He's not going to. It's private. You can cut it saying it's private. Yeah,
but he shouldn't have brought it up because it is
private.
Yeah, so I thought it was unbelievably. I totally agree with you. I think his intentions were. I disagree with Fiona. I think he wasn't trying to pass the buck. He was trying to protect his skipper and trying to allude to the fact that
I don't think he needed to.
Some stuff going on and.
Well, he does, but there's probably something. But Max has got the runs on the board, 7 All-Australians in 8 years. He doesn't need, he can have a bad game. And
he can have a bad game, but maybe he specifically wanted to flag that, that there was some factors behind it, but just his wording was wrong. He could have even done that. But
that's where it comes into excuse and might be absolutely valid that Max, but there was just no need.
It was an own goal that didn't help. Like, we'd already lost by 10 bloody goals to the Roos. We didn't need another own goal. So, I couldn't believe it when I heard it, to be honest.
Let's get on to 𝗚cie. The 𝗚cie Demons opened their 2025 VFL season with a thrilling draw against North Melbourne, finishing with 76 points apiece in an intense contest at 𝗚cie Fields. And despite controlling large parts of the game, 𝗚cie's poor accuracy in front of goal, kicking 10-16, prevented them from establishing a substantial lead early. 𝗚cie dominated early play, but missed chances and saw them unable to break away, recording just 2 goals 9 in the first quarter. Momentum swung throughout, with both teams exchanging leads repeatedly. North Melbourne took control early in the last, building an 18-point advantage, but 𝗚cie showed some great resilience, fighting back strongly with late goals from Chance Daltrey, Noah Uze, Tyler Edwards and Tom Fullerton. North had a late chance to win but missed, resulting in a draw. Standouts for 𝗚cie including Riley Bonner with 35 possessions, Riley Boldy with 31. D's listed players, Ruckman Tom Campbell had 23 possessions, whilst D's prize recruit Harvey Langford had 22. Caleb Lewis and Tom Fullerton both kicked 2 goals. The Demons now shift their focus next week to next week's home clash against Gold Coast, aiming for their first win of the season. George, you watched the game. Oh, also Bimman, I didn't realise you did too. So give us some brief impressions of the D's listed players, but note that we're quite far into the program.
Yeah, okay. I'll be quick. Big problem, the same problem that's been around for the last 2 years about the kicking for goals. Set shot kicking was just awful, particularly in the first quarter. I think it was a 3-11. We had 6-13 at half time. Sorry, three-quarter time. 10-16 in the end. Just the opportunities were there. We should have simply won the game from the shots that we had. Kine and Brown missed from 20 metres. Campbell missed from 15. Fullerton missed a couple in the first quarter. He only managed to get one in the last quarter. But what I didn't particularly like was the lack of, it was almost identical to the same situation that we saw in the seniors. There were so many players who just had no impact whatsoever in the game. Seston, Beryl, Adams, Kine and Brown, Fullerton, Billings a little bit, but not much. Laurie, I think, only played a half because he was the emergency for the seniors game. You could see the actual fantastic skills that Langford has. There was a brilliant move of his in the last quarter. Unfortunately, it didn't result in a goal, but his skills in contested situations are just first class. So it'll be great to get him back on the ground. But I think it was telling that the two main ball getters in the game were Baldy and Bonner. And they were 50% better than the next Melbourne listed player, who was Campbell. Campbell did a pretty good job in the ruck as a ruck. Doesn't do much around the ground, but if you've brought someone in to be a big body when needed, then he's the man. And it's, in retrospect, it would have been nice to have seen him in in the seniors game just to take the heat off Max. And I hope they either utilise him or even AJ for the coming week to take that off. So it was disappointing when we had the opportunity, even the last dying minute or so. with being 1 point up, Billings managed to kick the ball to no one, which sent it back into the North goal. North had a further opportunity that they completely fluffed, but it was a game that should have been won and simply wasn't.
B-Man, anything to add? You watched it too?
We were practicing our missing. Like, it was unbelievable. We should have been 5 goals up at the end of the first quarter. We were smashing them. And some of the kicking was appalling. I mean, I actually thought Billings played all right. There's a bit of an emphasis on his goal kicking. I would, if I was king for a day and Goody for a day, I would tell Steve May he's not allowed to kick under 50 metres. Ditto for Rivers, and I would tell Billings that he's only allowed to hand off shots at goals because he had 2 or 3 poor misses. I thought Langford was pretty good. He's pacey, he's not quick, so we need to surround him with quick players. But as George said, he made a couple of really good decisions, including one in that last quarter where he came back through the centre. He unfortunately did a brilliant bit of play right in the last bit of quarter, but then chumped his kick straight to one of their defenders. They took heaps of intercept marks, which was, funnily enough, exactly what happened on the Sunday. Is that Cobden? Is it Cobden? Whatever his
Cobden.
COMBDN. Cobden.
Yeah.
It sounds like an insurance company or something.
I don't think there is a D. Anyway,
Common. I don't think he's ever going to take as many bloody intercept marks in a game of footy again. And that Toby Pink, Toby Pink looked like bloody Glenn Dinning. He was killing us. So,
in the reserves they had Tomlinson.
Yes, and I was about to say in the reserve, it looked like he had white hair, or maybe it was all the white. But Tomlinson was carving us up, I thought. The positive out of it was that we didn't lose that game because we were 15 points down and the win was pretty strong. So for them to fight back, I was really pleased with that. I thought Baldy was, where's he from? He's a new player to Casey, isn't he?
Frankston, Turin, I think.
I had to laugh because for a little while there I thought they were just having a go at him because he didn't have a hair on his head.
He doesn't. He's bald and called Baldy.
Baldy by name, Baldy by nature.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're definitely the shooting for goal was exceedingly frustrating. And just on Campbell though, is that one thing is that we talked about it. It's important to have him in the twos to be able to at least practice the structures and the setups. And it was great to see Langford at his feet.
We're really going to miss White this coming year. I felt there was a real lack of leadership across the whole ground. He was one surety.
Yeah,
that ability to move the ball out of the centre, and he's just that level above VFL, not quite AFL. Yeah, we'll really miss him in the coming year.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get into changes.
One positive. Yeah. I thought Fullerton played all right. Like, it was the best of. I won't go crazy on it, but he did a couple of nice things, kicked a couple of goals, took a couple of good marks. The bit of a disappointing was Varel had no impact whatsoever, really.
Demons injury list continues to grow with Jake Lever ankle and Matthew Jefferson hand, both suffering injuries during the game. At this stage, the severity for each isn't clear unless reports come in, but it's unlikely either will be available this week. Stephen May fractured larynx and Caleb Windsor foot are also expected to miss again, and it's a bit strange to me that May only saw a specialist late in the week last week despite sustaining the injury in the lead up to round one and missing last week's match. Windsor, meanwhile, was seen on crutches in the room at the Marvel post-game. On a brighter note, Aidan Johnson will be available this week after surfing his one-match suspension. Jake Melksham was listed as 1 week away last week, though it's uncertain if he'll return immediately or regain some match fitness at Casey first. So before getting your thoughts, I've got some audio from our good mate 𝗟𝗲. Given today's packed show, didn't have a place to sort of put it, but he does mention a player now. He mentions a player that we might consider dropping, and we can discuss it here. So I'll play the audio from 𝗟𝗲, then B-Man, followed by George. Give me your changes and any comments you want to make about what 𝗟𝗲 has to say.
Boys, 𝗟𝗲 here. What a horrible game. I haven't had that feeling at a game since the Mark and Neal era, since the mid-teens, when we were just non-competitive. And the most annoying thing is, like, I have an expectation of us now, and we still stink. A couple of quick ones. Would you drop Bailey 𝗟𝗏? Really not getting it done. 4 touches, 1 goal, 0 tackles. What is he providing? I'd almost bring Aiden Johnson in and leave Bailey out at this point, depending on Jeffo, obviously. I thought Harry Sharp had a pretty dirty game. The knocks on him at Brisbane seemed to be the knocks on him at Melbourne. He's horrible, horrible user of the ball. Don't get me started on Woden talking about using the ball. Yeah, just a really, really horrible game. It really highlighted Vin Man's continual knock on our kicking ability, just being woeful. So many missed kicks, missed simple kicks. Yeah, and plus bombing into the forward line, mate. Charlie Comden looked like Jake Lever, 2021. Anyway, help us all feel better. I don't know there's much to help us feel better, but yeah, please give it a crack.
Well, if we have a major feel better now, Salt, there's no hope now at the final minutes of the show. Vin Man.
It'll be interesting. AJ's will come back in, won't he? I think that
100%. Yeah. Especially if Jefferson's out.
Absolutely.
Yep. Well, yeah. I mean, Jefferson out provides an opportunity for 𝗏𝗏, and they've got him up on high half forward flank, not really high half forward. I think he's played his best footy deeper leading out of the goal square, but Jefferson can't play up on half forward flank. So while Jefferson's in the side, if you want him in the side, almost by definition, you can't have 𝗏𝗏 playing that role. So maybe there's an opportunity for 𝗏𝗏 to go back and lead out from the goal square and play that sort of role. But yeah, I'd insult his camp. He's got credits in the bank, but he withdrew a fair chunk of them on the weekend.
He's not getting dropped considering if Jefferson's out.
Yeah, he probably won't be. So AJ comes in. Look, I wouldn't. I think. Again, I hate to be critical of players, but I just can't see why Langford will come back in. How many possessions did you say you got, George?
22. Yeah.
22. That's enough.
Yeah.
I think send him back. Get the full game inside mid. I'm a bit with you, Andy and George, around. It's a bit early to completely say the Langford experiment hasn't worked, but if you bring Langford in, you need to find
Langdon.
Langdon. It's a bit early to say the Langdon, but if you bring Langford back in, he needs midfield minutes, and so you've got to take him from somewhere, and that's either Sparrow, maybe Langdon. So Langdon back onto a wing and give Sparrow half forward, and then put Langford serious midfield minutes. Is hopefully they'll look at something like that. And if Lever's out, Jesus, that's
backline. This is the question: does Adams come in? And
he'd just about have to, wouldn't he?
That is the basic problem that we've got. That and it's the same with 𝗏𝗏. If you were to drop 𝗏𝗏, who would you bring in?
Well, you can't drop him.
Well, if you bring in Tolstrup, so that wouldn't be a problem.
He's out for ages.
He's out for 3 weeks. That's right.
Yeah, we have no one else to fill the holes that we've got.
I mean, Melksham, but I don't know if he's ready for a full game yet. And
what about what's McVee's situation?
He's still 2-3 weeks away, I think. It was that must have been a bad hammy, but it was 2-3 weeks last week, so he's not coming back in. And look, they're going to be a tough opposition for us to beat in terms of some of our, they'll certainly test us, in a lot of ways in areas that we normally don't struggle in, but they're an excellent centre clearance, an excellent stoppage team. As we were talking about before, George, I think you're right that those big players who can physically manhandle and beat physically Max one-on-one, that's where he struggles the most. But they've got a very, very good midfield. I mean, it's only one game, but they're number one because they've only played the one game and had the bye, which is another variable in this first part of the year that's throwing teams around a little bit. But they're number two for contested possessions off that one game, and number one for stoppage clearances and third in centre clearances. And
it was against the Eagles as well.
So they wouldn't have been a million miles off those stats for the whole of last season, particularly in the back half. They're a very strong stoppage side. And they also got on the bike against, they smashed up. This is a bit what I mean about the variability. They beat, at Perth,
In
136 points they put past Perth, who only scored 49. Well, a week later, the Lions go to Perth and only win by 18 points.
And I was
explain
together.
that. Like, that is a bizarre thing. That's what I mean by about how variable. But nonetheless, they beat them by 87 points, and the Suns were unbelievably effective in their forward half. They 22 repeat entries into forward 50, scoring 10-4 off 64 from forward half intercept possessions. 53 more points than the Eagles could muster from that score source. So they'll look to do something similar against us. They play very similar to Melbourne, and very strong stoppage side. And so we'll have to beat them in the stoppage to have any chance of winning. And I think our leg speed worries me. Hopefully Windsor's key. So that's the other one. Windsor. I'm not sure. Have you got any intel on Windsor's situation?
I did mention before he was seen on crutches. I saw him with my own eyes on the Channel 7 news report in the background on crutches. So maybe it could have just been keeping the pressure off the foot. I think it was it an infection
again? Didn't he get an infection?
I know. Yes. Yep.
We've had 2 larynxes and a player get 2 infections.
Do we know? Did he have surgery? Is he just keeping pressure off the foot? And that's why he's on crutches.
Well, I mean, he's
structural.
Not him having in the side really exposed and Cos as well exposes our leg speed. I mean, the Roos. I got it wrong on the Roos last week. Saying what plotters they were quicker than us. That's for sure.
Well, before we've done a bit of it. I was just going to give him a preview of the game before we go into it. A preamble. Demons.
And we've got the unknown injury of the week. We had Windsor last week, so we had Stephen May as the week before, so we've got one to come. Sure.
Well, Lever is rolled ankle. And then Jefferson, the poor bugger, busted hand. Yeah. What's that, a 4 to 6 week? Marty Hall is the player who maybe he could come back.
Yeah, he says tests. Jai Cully's 3 to 4 weeks. Aidan Johnson's back this week. Luca Canfield, don't worry about him. 4 to 5
Marty Hall
weeks.
Played against KC.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
This is last week's thing. Judd McVie was last week. It was 2 to 3, so that's 1 to 2. Melksham 1 week, so he's probably back for Casey this week. Tolstrup was 3 to 4, which was 2 to 3. Well, it's 2 to 3 now. Yeah. But he's still away, and Windsor TBC, and same with Stephen May.
May on the Channel 9 News, they said he went to see the specialist today and had good news, whatever that means.
Oh, okay, they said that today because I was wondering why is he just now going to a specialist? Should have been at a specialist as soon as he did it.
Especially at the Melbourne football, you couldn't drop a bloody football on the MCC without landing on a medical specialist, could you?
Yeah. So the Demons return to the MCG this week, looking to secure their first win of the 2025 season against the Gold Coast Sun. Fresh off a bye, the Suns enter this match full of confidence after a strong victory out west against the Eagles in round 1. Former Demons Academy player Mac Andrew and high draft pick Sam Flanders are both expected to return from chest and back injuries respectively. And players always seem to find their way back just in time to face the Ds. And if there already wasn't a good dose of MFCSS laced into this show, which there has been plenty, there's some more for you. George, anything you want to say about this match?
Yeah, like the Suns aren't what they used to be. Hardwick has picked up a couple of very good players to fill holes, like Daniel Rioli. Their midfield has matured over the years. The talent has always been there. It's now matured to the point that they are serious contenders. And the job that they did on the Eagles was in no part due to the maturity and the skills of people like Rowell and Anderson and Tuke Miller and Humphreys now in the middle. They're going to be a seriously good side this year. They will really challenge for finals this year with the teams that they got. They've got both Charlie Ballard and Collins holding down the back line beautifully, which is what you need. They're going to be seriously hard to beat this week, particularly coming off not only an 87-point win, but a bye after having travelled to Perth, which most clubs don't get the benefit of as well. So, yeah, they'll be seriously challenging at the very best.
They will indeed. So it's interesting on the betting front. We're $1.80 favourites. take it for what
was
it's
that
worth.
before or after the Melbourne game?
Now we're 275 second favourites. No, or at least we were yesterday. I'll have a look now.
Well, I'm not much of a betting man, but I'll tell you, B-Man, put money on the Gold Coast.
We're $1.94. They've come into $1.90 favourites, but it's basically a coin toss. So, it just speaks to the curious nature of footy at the moment, doesn't it?
All right, well, I think that's where we're going to leave it for tonight. So we'll be back next week to break down our game against the Kangaroos. If you want to listen to the show live as it happens, head on over to demonland.com on Monday nights at our new time of 8 p.m. And thank you to our 5-star reviewer on Apple Podcast. That's a thank you to True Red and Blue. Thank you to our commenter on Facebook, Fiona, and once again, apologies last week to Vic and Nat. And thank you to our voicemailer, Salty. Your questions and comments are an integral part of the show. So thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. Thank you to Sam6172, Leave It to Diva, Demon Saw, Go Lordy, D Future 15, Ethan Tremblay, D Old Fart, Mandy Lorian, Red Jacket, Doug Reamer, Ross Millen, Youngblood, Lazy, Buddha 82, Pipe Fitter, Garbo, D Minion, Scroll, GS77, Roosted Far, Dice, Lefty, Demon Cat, Witch's Hat, El Diablo 14, Pingu, Go D, Supreme Demon, Jane02, Delightful Play, and Travi 14. And thank you to my co-hosts, George and B-Man, and thank you to you, our loyal listeners. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we'll read it out and give you a shout out on the next show. Go Demons!
Go Red Leggers!